inspire young people to make and do things. So if you look at it through that lens, I think it's this movie. I mean, I know what Nico said about the subject matter, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
However, I do think this is potentially going to inspire young people to be like, oh, this old grizzled rocker, he was young once, actually. I didn't even know that. It didn't even occur to me that he was young and he didn't know himself, and he was searching for something. He's a searcher. I'm searching for something. And artists like Lord, searching for something. Like, I think we are attracted to people who are searching for themselves in public. And that's what I think we're getting with these, again, sort of stereotypical biopics. They're often about that, someone trying to find themselves.
Yeah.
But Bruce is one of the ultimate searchers. He's done so in public. This box set is another kind, like Nico said, he's letting us into his process and trying to find himself.
My name is Alvina Mahmoud. This show is called Commotion. Vishkan is here, Nico Stratus is here, Carl Wilson is here. There's a bunch of stuff to talk about, but in the spirit of, taking one look in the mirror and wanting to change your clothes and your hair and your face, let us hear some brand new Lord. Let's hear it.
I might have been born again, not ready to feel like I don't have the answers. There's peace in the madness over our heads, let it carry me.
That song is called Hammer. It is the opening track of the new Lord album, which is called Virgin, that is out today. Lee, I'm going to kick it over to you because we feel like we've talked a little bit about the narrative around this album, which is like Lord saying, hey, I have a bunch of questions about who I am as a person, a bunch of questions about my gender identity, a bunch of questions about where I'm headed as an artist. And then you kind of get this album. Would you say that that is actually the defining story of this album? Like, does it hold up when you think of it as a sort of a cohesive question about the album?
It's less of a cohesive question, and it's more of a cohesive journey to look for the words to define the question, for answers you don't know you need. Like, it is very yearning for something while still being, it is this very complex questioning identity in a way that is sort of a roundabout, open-ended idea that has no real answer because there's no real resolution to it. But it is this sort of searching for yourself. But it's an interesting thing for a pop star in the public eye to do, right? This idea of like, well, I don't really fully know about myself. Specifically, I don't know about myself as a woman, and I don't know what my relationship is to it. And I'm working through that and figuring some stuff out, with the album cover especially, that is like, in my eyes, is a nod to the Sticky Fingers cover with the zipper and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
This having, an X-ray with an IUD inserted, and like, this idea of like, well, what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to have this body? What is my relationship to this body? And what does this body do in relationship with other people? It's very still lustful and playful and all of these things, but it is also like, but who am I in here? And, in that, like, I think it is a very cohesive, put together thing, but I don't think it is done so in service of answering something or in having some broader question that it arrives at. I think it's just searching for those words, and it is sort of scrabbling those ideas together into something that feels real.
I think that, to me, like, that's a perfect description of it, because what Lord manages to do so well is paint you a portrait of exactly where she is, and it does not matter if that place is undefined. She's going to sort of like draw very specific and clear parameters around it. Carl, I gotta acknowledge that this album's kind of landing after tepid response to the last one, Solar Power, which, by the way, people are wrong about that, because Solar Power absolutely bangs, and no skips for me. But that's neither here nor there. But how do you see this album fitting in the Lord trajectory? Because she's kind of undoing some of the stuff that she said she's about in Solar Power.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a level where this album is a response to the response to Solar Power, where, that album tried to be very low-key and forward, kind of the natural world and herself, and there were all these ideas that kind of fed into it. And I think, like a lot of people, I felt like it ended up with an ambiguity of tone and a kind of recessiveness that made it very difficult to grasp onto. And now I think we have a stronger sense of why, and this album is about that, and certainly what she's talked about in interviews with this album cycle is about that she was actually in like an incredible state of crisis when she made Solar Power.
Yeah.
She was going through eating disorder issues,
stage
food issues, all of these things.
Yeah.
And that explains a lot of that tone from that album. in a totally different way than it was sold to us at the time. I mean, this album, I feel like, goes back and reclaims all of that history, and it really goes back to the beginning of her career and kind of says, what the hell has all this been? And, you know, calling people out a little bit along the way about ways that she was maybe exploited as a 16-year-old who is, for all of her self-possession and artistry, you know, a 16-year-old is ready for global fame in that way. And I think this album is really, like, viscerally kind of bringing all of that experience into her body and through that into the music so that the audience can get a sense of experiencing that with her. And I agree, because it's not about answering these questions. It's not the idea that this is going to resolve and now I'm a new person and I won't fix. You know, there's a little bit of that going, wait, this is being sold, who says that? And again, that's not what it's about. I think it's a really powerful statement, and especially, like, I don't think the singles have... I know, they don't get singles, but definitely not. I agree. You know, it's a 35-minute album that really one piece. You need to sit down and experience the story and experience with it.
There's certainly a reclamation for me in this album of Lord saying, in solar power, I sort of tried to stand for someone who could answer questions and just pretty be like, no, the thing that was better than it. And then you just, thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having us. Thank you. Thanks, Phil. Rich Ron is the host of the podcast Creative Controls called UK Skis in Edmonton. Nick Stratus is a culture writer in Toronto and the author of the incredible book, The Dad Rock That Made Me a Woman. Carl Wilson is a columnist for Slate. Okay, you know that I've been waiting for this one. It is finally Lord time. Let's hear it.
Gliding through all my body, gliding through, lighting from my recent ego depths, silencing overnight, silence through.
“行驶3公里后，下右侧出口。” 下右侧出口。行驶400米后，向右转上匝道。
Corporal Manso Sahak from North Vancouver RCMP says the door frame for the office of Minister of Infrastructure Bowen Ma was damaged when an unidentified
向右转上匝道。
morning. In a press conference, police wouldn't say what kind of device it may have been, adding they're not aware of any threats against Ma and they're exploring all motives.
Our investigators are in touch with her, Wilma's office, and so exactly that's something we're going to be looking at, see if this was specifically targeted.
In a statement, Minister Bowen Ma says incidents like this can be quite frightening. I appreciate the concern expressed by community members. Dorothy Snipe, CBC News, Vancouver.
U.S. President Donald Trump has abruptly canceled trade talks with Canada. In a blistering social media post, Trump again lashed out at Ottawa's trade policies, complaining about big tech companies. Kate McKenna has more.
Prime Minister Mark Carney left the meeting with the Council on U.S.-Canada relations, showing calm as President Donald Trump shakes two national economies with a single social media post, abruptly calling off trade talks.
We'll continue to conduct these complex negotiations in the best interest of Canadians in this negotiation.
Trump posted on Truth Social, calling a Canadian move to tax U.S. tech giant egregious, saying he'll put a blanket tariff on all goods in retaliation within 7 days. Asked about this in the Oval Office, Trump threatened Canada again.
Economically, we have such power over Canada.
The digital services tax became a law last year. It puts a 3% levy on digital revenue of more than $20 million. Think of companies like Amazon, Meta, and Google. The first payment is due on Monday, and it's set to cost American companies more than $2 billion USD. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Industry Minister Melanie Joly has ordered Hikvision Canada to close down its operations. The company, which makes security systems, is being closed down over national security concerns. Hikvision is partially owned by the Chinese government. Several countries have already cut off business with Hikvision over similar concerns. Donald Trump likes to sign executive orders to implement changes, and Friday, the U.S. Supreme Court made that easier. In a split 6-3 ruling, the justices said federal district court judges could no longer issue injunctions that apply nationwide. Paul Hunter explains.
Well, this was a big one, wasn't it? The case flows from Trump's push to change the so-called birthright citizenship, the constitutional right for anyone born in the U.S. to be immediately a U.S. citizen. Months ago, Trump signed an executive order limiting that right to exclude, for example, those born to undocumented migrants. Some lower courts blocked the move, issuing a nationwide injunction against the directive. Today's ruling said those lower courts do not have the automatic right to block presidential orders. And while it leaves the big question on birthright citizenship still to be decided, it means presidents broadly will have greater powers to affect change in America. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
The Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda have signed a U.S. brokered peace deal during a ceremony in Washington.
Today, we have chosen peace. What matters now is that we protect it.
Congo's Foreign Minister Therese Wagner says the deal must now be followed by disengagement, justice, and the return of displaced families. The fighting in eastern Congo has killed millions of people since the 1990s. Millions of others have been driven from their homes. The U.S. facilitated the deals in hopes of getting access to Congo's vast mineral deposits. That is your world this hour. For news anytime, visit our website, cbcnews.com.
前方100米处，请在交通信号灯处向右转。
Time now for a look at the BC weather. Along the north coast, rainy overnight, a low of 11. For the Peace region, a chance of showers and the risk of a thunderstorm.
现在向右转。
Interior, risk of a thunderstorm down to 10 degrees. For the southeast, clearing overnight with a low of 10. For the southern interior, partly...
请沿道路行驶500米。
A chance of showers overnight, a low of 13. Saturday, clearing late in the morning with highs from 20 up to 23 degrees in inland Metro Vancouver.
处向左转。
get anyone to tell your story. You need to encounter it. You need to see the person. So, making a film in Eastern Europe, or when you're conducting research as a scholar in Eastern Europe, you need to be able to A, drink, B, smoke, and 3,
请沿道路行驶900米，目的地位于限制通行区域。
I think it's about also letting people know who you are.
Lilia Topozova, filmmaker, historian at the University of Toronto. Her work explored afterlives of political violence and the relationship between remembering and forgetting.
I never record anything with people until I spend at least a year with them. I'm not interested in recording because people will be themselves, especially people who have gone through severe trauma. Severe trauma among their perpetrators.
She has spent more than 2 decades studying the Bulgarian Gulag, excavating a history that has been deliberately silenced.
Very clearly, the minister said, "Government is again humanity, symbol of organizing system."
Lilia by what lives in both the silence of survivors.
There was no language. There were no words. I knew they had been sent to camps. I could see many of them had their files, but they couldn't express.
And the silence of those who lived near the camps but learned to never acknowledge their existence.
They didn't want to talk to me about the camp. They wanted to talk to me about the weather, about Canada. I was also beginning to recognize that the camps are a kind of a present absence. Everybody knows they existed. Nobody wants to talk about them, at least directly. So I've had conversations with people about ordinary things, like the weather and mosquitoes, for instance.
As a filmmaker, Lilia usually turns to images to tell stories. With this,
前方200米处向左前方转，注意，禁止通行。
the sound of a room where someone simply cannot speak at all. And Krasnira Butsova, she recreated spaces from a Bulgarian home and filmed
现在向左前方转，注意，禁止通行。
Their installation is called The Neighbors. It was the official Bulgarian entry to the 2024 Venice Biennale. And on the fall of 2023, it had its North American premiere in a small room on the University of Toronto campus.
前方200米处，请在交通信号灯处向右转。
So we've just got one. Where are we?
We are on the fourth floor,
现在向右转，
the Devonshire building, and we are going to go to the room where we're going to stage the installation. Now, as you see, this is a project study room. My office is just across the hall. I was given the key to this room by a wonderful administrator who said to me, you know, Lily, you don't need to go downstairs. At that point, I was actually thinking of doing the installation in Canada. We had staged it very successfully.
前方200米处向右转。
That project on the workshop. And then I was given the key to this room. And now you see why I fell in love with it. And I like working with found objects. And now this room to me is a found object. It is a naturally sealed room. As you can see, there's no window. The window was sealed. The floor, if you take a look at the floor, it's quite old. In fact, it looks to me like an Eastern European apartment from the 1980s, early 1990s, even around today. And then here's the real answer, what I found.
There's a couple of old records,
现在向右转，
70s, but they're not. This is like an early version of a 33 record.
前方200米处，请在道路尽头向右转。
It's Russian, lesson 36, to lose, to seek, to find.
And there are two of these. Somebody kept these.
现在向右转，
And I decided that this is the perfect space because there are already objects of this era that speak directly to our research project, to our installation. And I became such a
I guess that's part of the attraction of the room. It's actually a very sinister room.
spooky, sinister room. It looks completely ordinary.
前方200米处，请在交通信号灯处向右后方转。注意，禁止通行。
We need to demonstrate the creepiness of the floor. Let's walk around.
现在向右后方转。注意，禁止通行。
One good thing about this room, you know what? It means that nobody can ever creep up on you.
And that when people come in, we don't need to do so much of the sound work. In a sense, it's already there.
前方200米处，请在交通信号灯处向右转。
The window's already sealed, so it means that we are already in a found space where we can begin building. Right?
现在向右转。
So the installation that you're putting in.
This is an installation that I'm putting together with two of my colleagues, Julian Chihirian and Krasimira Butova. Together with Julian and Krasimira, we already that represents the room of the forced labor camp survivors, Gulag survivors from the Bulgarian Gulag.
现在向右转。
Research that I conducted and on my interviews. So what we are actually recreating are the spaces where I conduct.
前方200米处向右转。
Sophia, we were inhabiting a massive former print house that was continuously occupied from 1930 until the pandemic, when we became pre-demolition. We were sort of the last residents of that space.
My name is Julian Chikarian. I'm a historian in training. I'm doing a PhD in the history of science at Princeton University. And I'm also a multimedia artist with an interest in archives and expositions of wayward histories.
We have 3 rooms that were part of this larger landscape.
Based on the oral histories that I recorded, there were 3 categories of camp survivor narratives. There were the narratives of the people who had always told their story. There were very few of them, but these are the kind of practiced narrators. That was one way of remembering the Gulag. The second way of remembering the Gulag were people who still had memories of their experiences, but they had never told them before. So people who had never shared their story, because usually nobody asked them. But they remembered everything, and they usually had chronicles of their experiences.
向西南方向。向西南方向。行驶200米后，向左转。 向东南方向，然后向左转，向左转。行驶200米后，向右转。向西南方向，然后向右转。向右转，然后掉头。掉头，然后向左转。向西南方向。
前方100米处向右转，注意，限制通行。
向东北方向。行驶50米后，向右转。向右转，然后向左转。向左转。行驶200米后，向右转。行驶150米后，向右转。向右转，然后向左转。向左转。
请沿道路行驶4公里。 前方100米处，请在交通信号灯处向右转。现在向右转。前方300米处向右转。前方300米处向右转。
行驶200米后掉头。您的目的地在右侧。
那个